First, the real issues facing the president in defense against allegations that President Trump froze $391 million in military aid intended for Ukraine in order to pressure its government to carry out investigations for his political benefit. Trump yesterday, in a tweet, quoting Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe, wrote that neither Ambassador Bill Taylor or any other witness has provided testimony that the Ukrainians were aware that military aid was being withheld. Right. You can't have a quid pro quo with no quo.
Congressman John Ratcliffe, Fox and Friends, where is the whistleblower? The do-nothing Dems case is dead. Donald, you were so desperate.
This is getting difficult to watch.
You know, Mika, House Minority Leader Kevin, what does he call him, Steve?
He calls him Steve, yeah. But he goes by the name of Kevin McCarthy.
So Steve made a similar argument on Tuesday.
They're claiming there's a quid pro quo with the president in a phone call of President Trump with the president of Ukraine on July 25th. We now find from all what they've said, even in here, on August 29th, Ukraine found out that the money was being held up from Politico.
You know, what's really interesting is that these Republicans aren't smart enough to wait 24 or 48 hours because every one of their defenses crumbles as badly as Houston Astros pitching in October. The New York Times, of course, reported that word of the freeze got into a high level of Ukrainian officials by the first week in August, according to interviews and documents obtained by the paper. According to the Times, Ukrainians were told the problem was not bureaucratic, and in order to address it, they were advised to reach out to acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. The Times points out that the timing of the communication shows the Ukrainians were aware the White House was holding up the funds weeks earlier than acknowledged. It also means that the Ukrainian government was aware of the freeze during the period in August when Rudy Giuliani and two American diplomats were pressing the president of Ukraine to make that public commitment to the investigations. And according to Acting Ambassador Bill Taylor's opening statement in his testimony before impeachment investigators, Taylor said he was told by National Security Council aide Tim Morrison that EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland directly communicated that quid pro quo to a top aide for the president of the president of Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the Associated Press reports Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was feeling pressured by Trump more than 2 months before their controversial phone call on July 25th. Three sources tell the AP that Zelensky gathered a small group of advisors on May 7th in Kiev for a meeting that was supposed to be about the nation's energy needs. Instead, the group spent most of the 3-hour discussion talking about how to navigate the insistence from Trump and Giuliani for a probe and how to avoid becoming entangled in the American elections.
So anyway, you get it. I mean, this goes on and on and on. Willie, there was a quid pro quo. It's so fascinating that these Republicans, you've seen a different defense over the past month or so. They make a defense, it gets undercut by documents. They make a defense, it gets undercut by testimony. And here it's very simple. The president of the United States was withholding military funding. We saw that. We've seen that in the testimony. And you really see it where Sondland, in his conversation with Taylor, said, boy, I think I made a mistake. And Taylor said, what? He said, well, I told them that we were only holding up the White House meeting until they publicly said they would be investigating Biden in the 2016 campaign. Taylor's like, well, why is that a mistake? And Sondland says, because it attaches to everything. We're not doing anything until they agree to publicly investigate Biden in the 2016 campaign. This is corrupt. They've got him nailed dead to center. And there's nothing these Republicans can do but come up with theatrical tactics to desperately try to distract, which, of course, that doesn't even work because we still got the evidence stacked like this on the desk.
Yeah, and Bill Taylor understood everything to include military aid. That's what he knew that Sondland was talking about there. If you go back to the original retweet from President Trump, by the way, of Congressman Radcliffe on Fox and Friends, he admits to withholding military aid. So he put that out there in his retweet. But into the specifics of what happened here, Donnie, this is... This just undergirds everything else we've already seen. We've seen the summary of the phone call. We saw the whistleblower report, and then we have Ambassador Taylor's full 15-page statement that we've all seen. We haven't seen his deposition yet. We've seen the statement. What the New York Times is reporting is that, of course, Ukraine understood that this was a quid pro quo. Of course, they knew there was something on the other side of the table, that they had to do something in order to get the money and defend themselves against the Russians. This lines up with everything we've seen in public testimony and private documents that have been released.
You know, it's interesting. You really have game, set, and match now. And the reason I bring that up is speed is important now. You know, the one thing that Trump does, and the one thing in this 24/7 news cycle that we have that we didn't have in Watergate, is that there is this constant flood of information, of misinformation, of lies and twists. And the American public can get a little numb to things. We have it in a very tight box now. Now, obviously, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have to do all their due diligence, but the faster they move, the tighter that box stays. Second point also is when watching those Republicans yesterday march, those white guys, those middle-aged, boring, nerdy-looking white guys walk down that steps was pathetic. And I challenge all of those guys 2 and 3 years from now, because they are living today. Donald Trump is going to be viewed very differently a few years from now. And I can't wait to be doing the campaign of anybody running against those guys to show these pathetic weenies walking down that step like lemmings. There was a 1984 Super Bowl commercial for Apple where they showed these guys just marching in lockstep. How pathetic. And Willie and I were just talking. Just as men, how do you go home and look at your wives and look at your children?
Well,
just
I think
pathetic people.
I think we'll mark you down as undecided on their future races. But I think so many Republicans right now who are blindly following Donald Trump out of loyalty will find a primary challenger in the next few years that aren't stained by the crimes, the misdemeanors, by the dirty deals that help Vladimir Putin and the Russians, these defenses. They know that time is coming, but right now the main thing they want to do is just avoid answering questions about Ambassador Taylor's testimony.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.